If your toddler is not talking yet, you end up stuck in the worst guessing game. Is it speech delay or is it autism? And online, it's either panic or toxic positivity with nothing in the middle. Today, I'm going to give you the middle, the stuff that actually helps. The difference is not about the word count, it's about communication. Quick disclaimer, I'm not diagnosing anyone, and this is not about medical advice. I'm just sharing our personal experience as the mom of a 7, almost 8-year-old child with autism and a learning disability. I think the biggest mistake people are making is just thinking about why my child isn't talking. The better question is, how is my child communicating? Because ultimately the goal is for them to communicate their needs and wants. It's not just about verbal communication. Not all children will end up communicating verbally, but that's not necessarily the end goal. Speech versus language. Let me make this ridiculously clear because people often mix this up. Speech is how the word sounds, like pronunciations, clarity, making the right sounds. And language is what the words mean and how we use them. Understanding the words, the gestures, the back and forth interaction. So a child can have a speech problem and still be super social. They could be pointing, chatting in their own way, just not very clear. And the child can have a language delay where they're not using any words at all, but they're using other nonverbal ways to communicate their needs and wants. And they could also be showing lots of social communication. For example, a child could say rabbit instead of rabbit. It doesn't mean they're autistic. And autism is not just late talking. Autism is a developmental difference that includes the social communication differences, plus the restricted and repetitive patterns, routines, the special intense interests. Like I mentioned in my previous video, Emma literally taught herself how to read and spell words at just the age of 2. If you look at my previous video, you can see her using these big foam blocks, spelling words like dinosaur without a mistake. And it's completely unprompted, and she taught herself. There's also all the sensory differences, like the issue with the loud noises, the issues with the textures of the food. I went into this in great detail in my previous videos about signs of autism in babies and toddlers. I've got 3 different videos on this. If you're interested in the specific signs, just have a look at the channel. There's also the repetitive actions, the different stimmings. I did go into this in a great detail in my previous few videos. I think the main point is that some autistic kids talk early. Some autistic kids talk late, some of them might never talk, but the speech alone does not tell you if the child is autistic or not. Speech delay does not equal autism, and yes, a child can have both. A child could have a speech delay and still be brilliant in every form of social interaction. Here's the checklist I wish I had. Not to label your child, just to know what support to push for. The first clue is joint attention and pointing. What I mean by that is, even if the child has a speech or language delay, they're still trying to share everything with you and not just point at cereal when they're hungry. I mean, when you go out for a walk and the child sees an airplane in the sky, for example, and they look up and they point at it and they want to share the moment with you. An autistic child would often just stand there, look up in awe. They would still wonder at the plane in the sky, but they wouldn't be actively looking to share that moment with you. They wouldn't encourage you to look at the same way. But a child with a speech delay, they would very likely try to share all these little moments with you. Even when you go out, they see a car, they see a train, they see a shop, anything. Even if they don't have any words yet, they would try to get your attention and they would try to get you to look at the same way. Whereas in an autistic child, they might point at things they want, or they might not point at all. They might just use your hands as a tool to get the things they want or need. So this is a big, big difference. And it's not just pointing with this shared attention, even the toys they're playing with. Are they bringing you toys to share with you? Are they showing you anything that interests them? Or are they just in their own little world completely? The second clue is the response to their name and social clues. Are they listening when you're calling their name? Again, it doesn't necessarily mean they're autistic. It could be that they have a hearing issue. Usually with a child who just have a speech delay, they would respond to their name, even though they're likely to be very frustrated if they can't communicate their needs. They would still try to seek out people. They would still try to connect with the adults, sometimes even the children. It makes a big difference how they engaging socially. It's really not just about their listening skills. Even a child with speech delay might ignore you sometime when you call their name. So you need to look at the bigger picture. What happens usually when you call their name? Most of the time, 3, 4 out of 5, do they look at you when you call their name? The third clue is the imitation. Does the child copies the actions from the songs, for example, wind the bobbin up? If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands, etc. Are they pulling silly faces, blowing raspberries? There's a lots of things, and imitation fuels the learning. If the child is not imitating at all, it can slow down their learning. It can slow down their speech development as well. Clue number 4 is play, flexibility, and repetitive patterns and behaviors. Children with speech delay often play in a variety of ways, and they can easily switch between activities if you ask them. As opposed to a child with autism, they might have very limited play skills. So, for example, they wouldn't pick up a big block and pretend it's a telephone and call someone, or they wouldn't try to take care of a dolly or anything, and they wouldn't be able to imagine that one toy functions as another. For example, they couldn't imagine that this huge brick is a pretend telephone. With autism, you may see more repetitive play, lining up, spinning, fixated over the objects. Also the routine. So an autistic child usually needs the same routine, or they could become very, very distressed. And we're talking about a meltdown here, not a tantrum. I do go into more details between meltdown and tantrum in my previous videos about the signs of autism in babies and toddlers. Check out my channel if you're interested in those in more detail. To be clear, every toddler can be repetitive. The question is intensity, rigidity, and whether it blocks the connection with the people. The fifth clue is their receptive language, their understanding. A child might not talk much, but they usually understand a lot of what you're saying. They're following simple directions. Could you put this in the bin? Can you get your shoes? Can you bring me this or that? So there's a sense of understanding. You feel that they understand a lot of what you say, even if not everything. And they usually know a lot of words. Even if they can't speak, they usually understand a lot of words. For example, plate, cup, food, etc. They know what's a shoe. So even if they can't use the language yet, they understand a good chunk of it, and they can follow simple instructions. If the understanding is also very delayed, that's something that's worth flagging to the professionals, because that is something that might need a different kind of support than just a general speech delay. An example of this with our child was that her understanding is still very limited, but at that age, she didn't have a clue about any of these things. She wouldn't even be able to do single things like I point at something, can I have it please, or anything, or she wouldn't be able to understand the spoken language. We had to start using picture exchange communication from around 18 months old, so she wouldn't have been able to do even simple instructions like come here, sit down, hold my hand, can we tidy up anything. A regular 18 months old, you can ask them to put a few toys in a basket, for example, or bring you their shoes. Clue number 6 is sensory and regulation patterns. Some kids are extra sensitive to things like washing their hair, brushing their hair, certain noises, not necessarily just loud noises. For example, our daughter, till to this day, she's almost 8. She is very, very sensitive to the mechanical voices like the washing machine, the dishwasher, or certain high-pitched sounds. And she regularly needs the ear defender for this. She used to be terrified of the Hoover. And these things change over the time. So she lets us hoover with her ear defenders on, but the washing machine is still a no-no. So I have to do the laundry when she's at school. She's absolutely terrified of the spinning of the washing machine. It's also things like, are they sensitive to tags inside their clothes? Or sometimes what we had with Emma, she was really, really specific about shoes. She was wearing the same shoes. And once it was too small for her, she refused to even try on another one. And it went on for years. So at the end, unfortunately, we had to literally put her old shoes in the bin in front of her in the car park of the shopping center, because first of all, it wouldn't fit her anymore. And second, she refused to try anything else. And when she didn't have shoes for a few days, then she was more willing to try some in the shop. And it might not be the best way to go about it, but the old one didn't fit her anyway. And they didn't make them in bigger sizes. So we didn't really have a choice. Unless we did this, she would have been holding on to those too small shoes for I don't know how long. So it's a tricky situation. And also they might seek out certain movements like spinning around or crashing into things. Or what we have with Emma is she likes to do this thing with her toes. So she's digging her toes into your skin. And for example, she's sitting next to me and then she's literally digging her toes on her foot into my leg, and she does that very often, and it can be really painful for me. It could come in a variety of forms, but you would notice if they have something like this. One sign means nothing. The patterns matter. When you see all these little cues together, for example, together with the social communication clues, then it just strengthens this suspicion. And these are all things that you can share with the professionals involved with you and your child's care. I think the main thing for us was that we stopped obsessing over the verbal speech. We stopped worrying about her not using the words. And also the thing is with Emma that she was able to pronounce a lot of words from around 2.5, but she wasn't able to use them at all. Still at the age of 7, almost 8, she's still using very, very little speech to communicate. She can ask for some food and drink, and she can share some small things, but it doesn't work back and forth yet. So it's not a two-way communication. She comes to me and she either repeats some phrases over and over and over, or she just tells me random things that she saw somewhere or whatever is in her mind. But for example, I still have no clue what she's doing at school. We try to put her on school dinners. I try to ask her in many, many different ways. What's in your tummy? What did you eat? Did you do this at school? Did you do that at school? She can't tell me anything. She can't answer any of those questions. It is still something we're working on every day. But I think the biggest turning point for us was accepting that we have to stop obsessing over the verbal communication and we should be happy with any form of communication. I printed and laminated some pictures, put some Velcro on the back and pop this on this book. But this is something you can make yourself at home at a very low cost as well. You don't have to buy this fancy, very expensive set. Just focus on certain signs in the beginning, the most important things. Don't try to get them to use everything because it's very difficult for them to learn to use this and they might be very resistant. Small things you can try, for example, if they have a favorite snack. Or for us with Emma, she was obsessed with her dummy for the pacifier. If you call that in America or any other country, we call it dummy in the UK. Basically, she was proper obsessed with it. I managed to get her to use that one symbol after a couple of months, and then we moved on to the different foods. I haven't been able to get her to use the nappy symbol forever because she didn't have a clue about being wet or soiled. And eventually we managed to potty train her at the age of 5.5, almost 6. So that's a topic for another video. If you're interested in how we potty train the non-verbal autistic child at the age of almost 6, that's coming to the channel as well in the coming weeks and months, along with other interesting topics as well. If your child is not talking and you're worried and you're considering, is it autism, is it speech delay? I think the very first thing that you can do is to have their hearing checked out. And they don't need to follow instructions or anything for that. They could have glue ear or something like that. It's usually they hear kind of like they would be underwater, and that's why it's really difficult for them to hear what is being said, causing them to feel like they're underwater. And then just imagine going to the pool, stick your head under the water. Can you hear anyone talking to you? No, you can't. You're not going to understand what they say, and if you can even make out the sound, any of the sounds they make. The next thing on my checklist would be to track their communication. And I don't just mean write down how many words they're using, how many words they're responding to, how consistently are they responding to their name. So you have notes for your appointment when you finally see a professional, and just try to focus on these things, the shared attention, joint attention, all these sensory sensitivities and everything. Just keep a note of everything, what's happening. And there's lots of guidelines you can look at to see where your child roughly should be with their development. In America, there's the CDC Act guidelines. In the UK, we've got the NICE guideline, or there's a document called Development Matters from the UK government. And ask for screening and referrals really, really early, because the wait lists are ridiculously long. Not 100% sure how it works in every country, but in the UK, even with the more higher support need, the children, they still have to wait years. Everybody have to wait years. If you are in the UK, then you can talk to your house visitor or your GP about your concerns. Also, it's very important to practice turn taking. I think turn taking is one of the most important social skill that they're going to have to learn, and you can practice it easy with your child at home. You don't necessarily need anything fancy for that. If you just remember one thing about this video today, speech delay is about words arriving late or unclear. And autism is about a broader pattern and about social communication differences, repetitive patterns and behaviors. But either way, the next step is the same. Encourage the communication, reduce the frustration, and get the right professionals involved with your child. If you find this video helpful and found any value in this video, then subscribe to the channel for more SEN-focused family content.